My 315-pound fiancé demanded I lose 28 pounds for our wedding. I asked whether he'd go on a diet, too. Can you imagine standing at the precipice of your dream wedding, only to have your fiancé look you in the eye and demand you change everything about yourself? It was a moment that shattered my world, making me question if the man I loved ever truly saw me at all. 5 years ago, Mason walked into my life at a work conference, and honestly, he swept me off my feet. He was this big, confident guy with a humor that could make my stomach hurt from laughing so hard. I'd always believed that how someone treated you mattered more than their appearance, and he treated me like gold. When we started dating, I was a comfortable 145 pounds, a size 6, and Mason constantly showered me with compliments about my beauty. I never for a second thought he didn't desire me just as I was. 3 blissful years later, he proposed at the restaurant where we had our very first date. He dropped to one knee, tears in his eyes, promising to make me happy forever. I said yes without a second thought because I loved him truly, and I believed he loved me just the same. Wedding planning kicked off almost immediately, and Mason, he had opinions. So many opinions. He knew the exact venue, the perfect caterer, the only band that would do. Navy and gold were non-negotiable. He even had a list of guests I'd never met. Since he was so enthusiastic, and I truly wanted him to have his dream day, I let him take the lead on most things. It felt like a partnership, him bringing the vision, me supporting it. Then came the photographer. Mason spent 5 hours researching packages, devouring sample albums like they were exam prep. He built spreadsheets comparing every detail, and I actually loved it. I thought, this man wants to capture our special day perfectly. After we paid the deposit, he sat me down at the kitchen table. He said he needed to discuss something essential. He talked about how we'd look in the photos, how he wanted our wedding album to be something we'd always be proud of. I nodded, agreeing wholeheartedly. I wanted that too. Then he dropped the bomb. Mason advised me to lose weight. He said the camera adds 10 pounds. 8 pounds, he corrected himself. And he didn't want me to look overweight in our photos. He recommended I shed 28 pounds. 28 pounds. He claimed the wedding was 9 months away. Plenty of time to start immediately. He even said he'd already researched diets and gym memberships for me. I just sat there, trying to process what I'd just heard. It was like the air had been sucked out of the room. Can you repeat that? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He repeated it, as if it were the most reasonable, loving request a fiancé could make. He said he wanted me to appear good, that losing weight would help me glow like a bride should. Just because I love you, he added, and I want the best for us. Then I asked him, Mason, are you going to lose weight? He actually chortled, laughed like I just told the funniest joke in the world. Different, he said, waving his hand dismissively. Grooms don't have to bother about pictures like brides do. Everyone will be looking at you anyway. He even threw in that tuxedos flatter all body shapes. I looked at him, all 315 pounds of him, then down at my own 145. Mason, I said, by any measure, I'm not the one who needs to lose weight in this relationship. He got defensive, said I was missing the point. It's not for health, he insisted. It's aesthetic. Brides should look a certain way, and you're not quite there. Then the final, gut-wrenching twist. My mother agrees. My heart actually sank. His mother? He said she thought I could tone up before the wedding. I asked him, my voice dangerously calm, when exactly did you discuss my body with your mother? He said they talked about it 10 days ago, looking at my old pictures. His mother, he said, noticed I had gained a few pounds since we started dating and thought the wedding would motivate me to get back in shape. I hadn't gained weight, not an ounce. I weighed the exact same as when we met. I ran 4 miles every morning. I did yoga 3 times a week. Nothing about my body had changed. Only Mason's and his mother's perception. I didn't shout. No tears came. I just stared at this man I had committed to marry, and I realized with a sickening certainty that I didn't know him at all. I had one more question. Mason, I asked, would you marry me if I didn't lose weight? He paused, just for a second, but in that hesitation, I learned everything I needed to know. He promised he would still marry me, but maybe he'd be disappointed. He wanted to be proud of his bride. He hoped I wouldn't be selfish. Slowly, deliberately, I took my engagement ring off my finger and placed it on the table between us. Mason stared at it, confused. What are you doing? He asked, his voice strained. I'm losing weight, I replied, my voice steady. He looked bewildered. How much? He asked. 195 pounds, I said. It took him a few seconds, but then it clicked. He realized I was talking about him. He stared at that ring like it was a foreign object, the diamond catching the kitchen light, throwing miniature rainbows across the table. I watched his face change from confusion to dawning realization to pure panic. He opened his mouth twice before words came out. His voice was tight, biting, a half octave higher than usual. Are you serious? He demanded. Right now. I have never been more serious about anything in my life, I told him. I need you to leave our apartment tonight so I can think straight without you trying to get me to lose 28 pounds. He leaned back so hard his chair scraped across the floor. He claimed his name was on the lease. This is my home, he insisted. I'm not leaving. I stood up, grabbed my handbag from the counter. My keys were in the microwave bowl, as usual, but they felt heavier than ever in my hand. As I walked towards the door, Mason called out, Where are you going? I ignored him, opened the door, walked down the hallway and got to my car. The 25-minute drive to Brooks' place felt like hours. Every traffic light seemed to stretch on forever. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. The camera adds 8 pounds. He wants to be proud of his bride. The words just stuck in my head, a horrible, looping song. Around 9 p.m., I pulled into Brooks' parking lot. I sat in my car for a minute, just breathing. I chose the stairs instead of the elevator, needing the exertion, climbing 4 flights to her apartment. When I knocked, she opened the door in her old college sweater and pajamas. She looked at my face, didn't say a word, just pulled me inside and shut the door. Her apartment smelled of the vanilla farmer's market candles she always bought. She led me to the couch, then vanished into the kitchen. I heard the kettle filling, the stove igniting. She returned with 2 mugs and a box of tea bags and sat beside me. Once I started talking, I couldn't stop. I poured out everything. Mason's comments, the photos, his mother's baffling support. I told her about his hesitation when I asked if he'd still marry me. I told her about taking off the ring. Brooke didn't interrupt once. She just listened, refilling my mug as I talked until my voice was raw. I woke up on Brooke's couch the next morning, my neck stiff. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. 21 missed calls from Mason. I scrolled through 12 texts, a horrifying progression from apologies to accusations. One said I overreacted to a simple request. Another claimed he was boosting my performance. A third, his mother only wanted the best for us. I pressed my fists against my eyes, placing the phone face down. Brooke emerged from her bedroom, still in jammies, asking if I wanted coffee. I rarely drank it, but I nodded. She handed me a mug with nevertheless printed in white French letters. I held the warm ceramic, staring at my phone as if it might explode. For more texts from Mason popped up. Let's talk like adults. You're being childish. My mother is upset. I put the phone away and just drank my coffee. We had scrambled eggs and toast at Brooke's kitchen table. When she finally asked what I was going to do, I had no idea. She grabbed a pen from her junk drawer and a napkin. She started a list, bank account first, then landlord, and a lawyer, maybe after you assess your needs. She double underlined, assess your needs. She urged me to open my own bank account before Mason could mess with our money, to talk to the landlord about the lease, and most importantly, to decide what I wanted before his explanations and apologies wore me down. Looking at that list, I felt a shift in my chest. A profound realization hit me. I had shrunk myself completely to please Mason and his mother. I had let him pick the venue, the caterer, the band, the colors. I had laughed at jokes that weren't funny. I had agreed to things I didn't want because he seemed so convinced. "I'm done shrinking," I told Brooke, and she squeezed my hand across the table. Later that morning, at 11:30 a.m., I returned to our apartment, knowing Mason would be at work. My heart pounded as I turned the key, even though his car wasn't in the lot. The unit was exactly as I'd left it. Dinner dishes still in the sink. My engagement ring still on the kitchen table. I picked it up. In the harsh sunlight, the diamond just looked small. How had I ever found it beautiful? I pulled 3 suitcases from the bedroom closet. I packed clothes for 9, maybe 14 days. My laptop, my running shoes, family photos from my bedside table, my yoga mat and my favorite coffee mug, my bedtime books and my college journal. I looked around the apartment again and realized how little of it was actually mine. Mason's old furniture, his mother's chosen wall art. 3 suitcases held my entire life. I zipped them up, ignored the ring, and left. As I was loading the second bag into my car, Mason's car pulled into the lot. He parked next to me, got out, and walked over before I could close my trunk. "I'm just getting some things," I said, my voice flat. He suggested we talk like adults. I told him I needed to process his request first. He called me unreasonable. He'd thought about it all night, he said, and realized he might have said things wrong, but he still made a good point. Brides should look their best, he insisted, promising to help me succeed. "Mason," I said, "I told you I never wanted to lose 28 pounds. I told you I just wanted time to think." He blamed my thinking, said I overthought a simple conversation and made it theatrical. He believed that if I just let him explain, I'd understand how much he loved me. I got into my car and closed the trunk. He spoke through my locked car window, his mouth moving, but I couldn't hear the words. I started the engine, backed out of the spot, and left him standing there. That afternoon, my sister Harper called. I told her everything. There was a long silence on her end. Then she declared she'd be at Brooke's apartment in 3.5 hours, driving straight through. I tried to tell her not to, but she insisted. True to her word, her extended cab pickup arrived 3.5 hours later. She gave me a hug so fierce I could barely breathe. Then she asked if I still had the apartment key. When I confirmed, she just said, "Great, because we're going to get the rest of your stuff." Mason's car was gone again when we got back to the apartment. Harper didn't probe or ask. She just started packing. She took my winter clothes, my kitchen supplies, my desk, my books, even my 4-year-old yard sale lamp. She whispered about men who thought women existed to look good in photos. The nerve! His mother! 315 pounds can go to hell. Her outrage made me feel less weird, less like I was overreacting. On Wednesday morning, I waited at a busy bank. The woman behind the counter asked how she could help, and I said I needed a new account. She requested my information, handled the forms with practiced ease. She didn't ask why I was opening a new account or where the money came from. I walked out with 55% of our savings in my name. The number on the screen was smaller than I wanted, but much larger than I feared. Signing those documents felt scary, but undeniably right. It felt like independence, though I didn't quite know what that meant yet. Mason showed up at Brooke's apartment that Wednesday night unannounced. He knocked while I was eating. Leftover Chinese on the couch. Brooke looked through the peephole, called my name. I shook my head, but she nodded, then opened the chain-locked door. Mason demanded a private conversation. Brooke told him I'd call him when I was ready, and he needed to respect my space. His voice rose. He called this stupid, said my friends were manipulating me. He accused Brooke of turning me against him. Brooke firmly told him to leave. He mumbled something else I couldn't hear. Then a powerful thud echoed through the hallway. A kick. Brooke locked the door, joining me back on the couch. He'd left a mark on her doorframe. We heard his footsteps slow as he left. Thursday afternoon, I visited the landlord, a woman in her early 60s with reading glasses on a chain. She checked my lease. "What happened?" she asked, like she'd heard the story 100 times. My lease had 5 months left, and she apologized, explaining Mason and I were both legally responsible for the rent until then. She suggested finding someone to take over my 60% if I wanted to leave early. New tenants needed her approval, but she'd work with us. I thanked her, walked upstairs, a new purpose forming. I had something to focus on, instead of feeling stuck between my old life and this new, uncertain one. I tried to be normal at work on Monday. Grant, a coworker, brought me coffee at 9:30 a.m. and asked about lunch. "Yes," I said, almost surprised by the sound of my own voice. At the sandwich shop, 3 blocks from the office. Grant sat across from me by the window. He asked about wedding preparations and my stomach churned. He'd seen Mason and me at the corporate Christmas party in December, Mason practically parading me around, announcing our engagement to everyone. I took a bite of my sandwich, buying time. "Wedding stress is manageable," I said, my voice sounding fake even to me. Grant just nodded, mentioning a project due next week. I appreciated his kindness, his lack of intrusive questions. Walking back to work, I realized how many coworkers knew Mason, how many questions I couldn't answer. My phone buzzed during a meeting Wednesday afternoon. A text from Mason. "My mother wants to discuss this misunderstanding. She thinks she can help refocus us." I stared at the message. Then someone asked about the quarterly report. I pretended to listen, rereading the text in the bathroom after the meeting. I knew who put the weight loss idea in his head. This wasn't Mason's original plan. His mother had been disgusted with my body for months. I blocked her number before I could reconsider. I didn't need her explanations or her manipulation. Mason texted 4 more times, asking why I wasn't answering his mother. I put my phone face down and focused on my work. The wedding planner called Wednesday morning. Her voice was confident, cheerful, asking about final guest counts. I closed my office door before telling her we were canceling. The joy drained from her voice, but she admitted she understood. "We'd lose most of our deposit," she said. "Too late for a full refund from the venue. The caterer kept over half. The band their deposit. Only the photographer would refund us, minus a processing fee." I did a quick mental calculation while she spoke. Over $9,500 gone. I just begged her to cancel everything. She apologized, promising to email the documents. After hanging up, I sat at my desk, sick about the money, but knowing deep down it was worth it. $9,500 felt like a fair price to pay to escape a marriage built on conditional acceptance. Thursday night, Brooke suggested I see a professional. "Friends are great," she said, "but you need real help processing this." She'd already scheduled sessions with Claire Bennett, a therapist who accepted my insurance, for the following week. I booked the appointment while she was on the phone, before I could convince myself not to go. My first session started at 3:30 the following Wednesday. Her downtown office had a lavender-scented waiting room. She was younger than I expected, with kind, knotted brown hair. She asked me about my ideal marriage. I spoke about our wedding, the house, the potential children. Claire listened, uninterrupted. Then she asked how Mason would impact my daily life. As I spoke, I realized I'd imagined a lifetime of trying to meet his changing standards, constantly insecure. My marriage would have been spent worrying about my weight, my beauty, my worth. Claire wrote something in her notepad and then asked how I felt. I regretted almost choosing that life. Friday afternoon, a voicemail popped up. Mason had texted me his mother's number. In the work parking lot, I listened in my car. Her voice was vehement. She called me selfish and immature for rejecting a good man over advice. He deserved better than someone who couldn't take criticism, she said. I had erred greatly. Then, her tone almost sweet, she talked about my relationship comfort. She'd warned Mason months ago, She claimed that I'd let myself go after the wedding if I wasn't careful. She was just preventing it. The message was 2.5 minutes long. It took 2 listens to truly grasp how anyone could think this way. Mason had asked me to lose 28 pounds after months of her criticizing me, calling me comfortable, and predicting I'd gain weight. I deleted the message, and then I got mad. I told Brooke about the voicemail over coffee Saturday morning. Her anger was immediate. She said things about Mason's mother that made me laugh for days. She then revealed what a mutual friend had told her. Mason was claiming I'd left him without warning over a minor wedding planning dispute. His version made me sound unstable. He was playing the victim, pretending to be shocked. My face heated up. Brooke asked if I wanted to set the record straight. I agreed immediately. More thought followed. Claire, in our next session, had suggested I focus on my own healing, not on managing other stories. I avoided confronting Mason's arguments. Even though Brooke thought it was smart, she said she'd tell anyone who asked that Mason was lying. Sunday afternoon, Brooke called with good news. Her boyfriend knew a renter, a guy who needed a place to take over my half of the lease in 6 weeks. I called the landlord. She mentioned checking the new tenant's credit, but it sounded promising. I texted Mason. I found a tenant for my half of the lease. The call started immediately, loud and furious. He said I was abandoning our home, abandoning us. He said I wasn't even trying to compromise. I waited patiently for him to fall silent. Then I told him, "You abandoned us when you made my dress size a condition of your love." "That's not fair," he snapped. "It's fair," I said and hung up. My hands were shaking, but I felt good. I had defended myself. I couldn't sleep Monday night. I looked through old photos on my laptop. Mason and me, dating 5 years ago. That work conference where we met. Our 4th date at a baseball game. A beach weekend, 7 months later. I looked the same in all of them. Same face, same body, same size. I hadn't gained weight. His request hadn't been a reaction to change. It was preemptive control, designed to prevent me from ever falling short of his standards. Maybe he'd always had these thoughts, just waited until we were engaged to voice them. Regardless, it proved my choice was right. I closed my laptop and finally slept. Mason texted Wednesday, asking to meet for coffee to divide our things. I agreed to a coffee shop near my office on Thursday afternoon. He was at a back table when I arrived. He stood to hug me, but I quickly sat down. He sat, too, and started talking immediately. He didn't mean it that way. He was nervous about the photos. Weddings were expensive, and he wanted perfection. We'd paid $3,400 for the photographer, so he just wanted good photos. He never meant to hurt me, he insisted. I overreacted. He spoke nonstop for 20 minutes. I just watched him, silently. He finally paused. "Are you going to say anything?" "Mason," I said, my voice quiet but firm, "asking your partner to lose weight for photos isn't nervous. It's malice disguised as concern. Your inability to comprehend that disqualifies us from marriage." His face turned beet red. Other customers looked over at his loud voice. He demanded to know why I was punishing him for caring about our wedding. He wanted to make us special. I was unreasonable and stubborn. I got up while he was still talking, walked out of the coffee shop, and drove away. He sent texts, but I didn't read them. I was done arguing with someone who simply didn't understand. Monday morning, an email from a conference organizer landed in my inbox. The annual professional development conference was 6 weeks away. Mason's name appeared 4 rows below mine on the attendee list. My stomach twisted. I'd signed up 8 months ago when we were still planning our future. The thought of staying in the same hotel for 4 days made me want to cancel. I started an email requesting reassignment, but stopped halfway through. Mason had taken 5 years of my life and shaped every decision. He would not steal my career opportunities. I deleted the draft and wrote another. Mason and I worked in related departments, so I asked the organizer if we could be in different workshop tracks to benefit our company. Within an hour, she replied, promising to minimize overlap. I felt a wave of relief and a surge of pride that I'd stood up for myself instead of hiding. I saw Claire that afternoon. When she asked how I was handling the separation, I explained the conference situation. I mentioned a new concern. My thoughts kept returning to the wedding planning and how Mason had made every decision. Claire asked me what I had chosen for the wedding. Sitting there, I tried to remember. The architecture had drawn him to the venue. The caterer was his choice for a specific menu. He picked the band after hearing them at his cousin's wedding. Navy and gold were his college colors. His family and co-workers dominated the guest list. His mother advised me on what would photograph well when I chose my dress. Claire asked what my wedding wishes were. I realized I was clueless. I never considered it because Mason was so excited about everything. I just followed his plans. Claire noted the pattern. Mason made decisions for us without actually consulting me, and I accepted it, thinking it was compromise. But compromise, she said, meant both parties contributed. Mason decided, and I agreed because disagreeing felt too difficult. I left therapy that day feeling like someone had turned on a light in a room I'd been sitting in for 5 years. I could finally see all the furniture I'd been tripping over in the dark. Harper called that night, saying she found a micro one-bedroom apartment available immediately. The kitchen was a hot plate and a mini fridge, the bathroom so small you could sit on the toilet and wash your hands in the sink. The rent was $250 more than my half of the current apartment, but it was available now, and it was mine alone. I told Harper I'd take it. She picked me up Saturday morning with her truck, and we loaded my clothes, books, kitchen supplies, and the small desk I brought into the relationship. No elevator in the building, so Harper helped me carry everything up 4 flights of stairs. We spent the afternoon setting up my new space. My bed against the wall, my desk under the window, clothes crammed into the barely sized closet. Harper and I went to Home Goods to buy curtains. I stood in the aisle, staring at beige, gray, white, navy. Then I saw bright yellow curtains, sunshine patterned. Mason would have hated them. His mother would have called them too loud. I bought them immediately. Harper helped me hang them, and the whole apartment looked different, brighter, happier. Mine. I looked around this small, expensive space that I had chosen without considering anyone else's opinion, and felt free for the first time in years. On Sunday afternoon, at the grocery store near my new apartment, I was reading labels in the pasta aisle when I heard my name. Nolan, Mason's best man, stopped his cart next to mine and asked how I was doing. I said I was fine and tried to move past him, but he stepped in front of me. He said Mason was really torn up about the breakup, not eating or sleeping, just sitting around looking miserable. He suggested I give Mason another chance because everyone makes mistakes, and Mason loves you. I looked at Nolan, wondering what Mason had told him. Nolan looked uncomfortable, saying Mason mentioned wedding planning disagreements. I told Nolan that Mason demanded I lose 28 pounds so I wouldn't look heavy in our wedding photos. Nolan's eyes widened. I didn't know that, he said. Mason should be torn up about what he said to me, I replied, not about facing consequences. Nolan was quiet for a moment. I'm sorry, he finally said. I didn't realize. I would have reacted the same way you did if someone told me to lose weight for photos. I appreciated his honesty. I told him I needed to finish shopping, and he moved his cart out of my way. I met Brooke for coffee Wednesday morning before work. She looked at me with an unreadable expression. I heard something from another friend, she said, and I want to tell you. No one in their friend group ever knew why Mason's previous girlfriend left. She just stopped showing up to events, and Mason said they grew apart. Brooke always thought it was weird how quickly that relationship ended. She wondered if Mason had done something similar. After searching Mason's old photos, I found Lauren, his ex, on social media. She lived 3 towns over. I stared at her profile for a long time, debating. It felt strange to contact a stranger about her past relationship, but I needed to know if Mason had a pattern of this behavior, or if I was somehow unique in bringing it out of him. I introduced myself, said I was recently engaged to Mason, and asked if she'd be willing to talk about their relationship. I hit send before I could change my mind. Lauren responded the next day. We agreed to have lunch Saturday at a restaurant halfway between our towns. I arrived first, sitting at a window table. Lauren arrived 12 minutes later, recognizable from her photos. She sat across from me and we ordered. Then she asked, "So, what happened with Mason?" I told her everything. The weight loss demand, his mother's involvement, his laughter when I asked if he would lose weight. Lauren nodded, her expression unsurprised. Mason behaved similarly with her, she said. At first, he was wonderful, supportive. Then the comments started. Her job wasn't prestigious enough. Her friends were holding her back. He criticized how much time she spent with her family. Then her appearance. More makeup, dress more casually, lose a few pounds, tone up. He always wanted her to be the best version of herself. Lauren said she tried for 7 months to change her hair, buy new clothes, join a gym. But he always found something else to improve. She left, she said, when she realized the point wasn't improvement. The point was control. I drove home from lunch with Lauren, feeling both validated and profoundly sad. Her story proved I wasn't crazy or oversensitive. Mason had done this before, criticizing women and passing it off as care. I felt sad that I had wasted 5 years on someone whose behavior was so predictable. If I had known about Lauren earlier, maybe I would have seen the signs sooner. Left before we got engaged, planned a wedding, built a life together that I now had to painstakingly dismantle. I called Sienna from my car and told her about Lauren. She listened, then changed my perspective. Recognizing the pattern now, she said, saved you from wasting more years. Some people stay in relationships like this for decades because they never get confirmation that the problem is real. You have proof that leaving was the right choice. That's worth celebrating, even if it hurts. 1 month later, I checked into the hotel for the conference. My stomach dropped. Mason was across the lobby, talking to an accountant. I knew he'd be here, but seeing him made it too real. I headed for the elevator to avoid him. But Grant, from my department, who I'd met at company events, asked if I wanted coffee before the first session. I agreed. Being with someone was better than being alone. Grant ordered 2 lattes. He didn't mention Mason, didn't ask about my personal life. He just talked about work projects and conference sessions. His casual kindness made me feel less alone. I realized I'd been so focused on Mason, the wedding, the breakup, that I'd forgotten I had other people who cared about me. The first day of sessions went well. The organizer kept her promise. Mason and I were separated. I didn't see him again until the networking break Friday afternoon. I saw Mason walking toward me. Grant, bless him, blocked his path. I watched Mason explain a work project to Grant, who was his colleague, and I was so grateful. Grant kept Mason busy for 15 minutes, talking about budget reports and timeline adjustments. After their conversation, I moved to another part of the room and found Grant near the refreshment table. I thanked him and he just shrugged. Everyone deserves colleagues who have their back. I realized I had more support than I ever thought. Sunday night, after the conference, I checked my mail. A travel company envelope. A payment notice for Mason's honeymoon package, scheduled for 10 weeks from now. I'd been so focused on what I lost when I left Mason that I hadn't even thought about what I still had. The package was non-refundable. An entire $6,800 cost was due in 45 days. I called Mason immediately. He answered on the 3rd ring. I asked him why he never canceled the honeymoon. He said he forgot about it with everything else going on. I told him he needed to handle this. He said we should both pay half, since we both benefited from booking it originally. I told him I wasn't paying for a honeymoon that wouldn't happen because of his behavior. He said I was being unreasonable. I hung up and called the travel company. The representative said only Mason, as the primary booker, could make changes or cancellations. She also said they'd send the account to collections if payment wasn't received by the due date. I texted Mason the deadline and told him to handle it. He didn't respond. I scheduled a lawyer appointment for the next week. Mason's financial mess. My lawyer, a woman in her early 60s, listened as I explained the honeymoon, the wedding deposits, and the security deposit from our old apartment that Mason still owed me half of. She looked at our old lease, the honeymoon booking email trail, screenshots of Mason's texts claiming I owed him for wedding cancellations. For 20 minutes, she read, then looked up. She suggested writing a clear division of debts to offset what Mason claimed I owed against what he actually owed me. The security deposit was $1,350, and Mason never paid me back his half when we moved. That covered most of what he said I owed for the venue deposit. She typed a document right there, listing every shared expense and who was responsible. According to her calculations, Mason owed me $450 more than I owed him. The wedding venue was split evenly, since we both signed that contract. Other deposits were divided similarly by who signed what paperwork. I paid her fee and left with copies of everything in a folder. In our next therapy session, Claire asked me what I wanted for the wedding, and I still couldn't think of a single detail. She also asked if I was grateful that Mason wanted to marry me. Sienna had asked what I meant by someone like him. I said Mason was confident, funny, successful, and I sometimes wondered why he picked me. Claire pointed out that I was also confident, funny, and successful. She asked how it felt different. I realized I had been performing gratitude for being chosen. Mason made me feel like I should be thankful someone wanted to marry me. So I didn't advocate for what I wanted, for fear of appearing difficult or ungrateful. Claire asked if I deserved wedding opinions. Of course, I replied. Hearing myself say it out loud made me realize I hadn't acted like I believed it. This pattern, she said, probably appeared in other areas of our relationship. I thought about all the times I agreed to things I didn't want, or stayed quiet when Mason made decisions without asking. The wedding was just the biggest example of how I'd shrunk myself to please him. That week, I ran 5 and 6 miles because 4 felt easy. I signed up for unlimited monthly classes at an advanced yoga studio across town. The classes were harder than I was used to, and I loved the feeling of my muscles shaking, breathing hard, knowing I was getting stronger. Every mile I ran felt like I was shaking off Mason's shame. He wanted me to change my body to meet his standards, but I was changing my body for myself. I told the yoga instructor I was training to feel like myself again, and she smiled like she understood. After class, I looked in the mirror and saw someone taking up space without apology. I didn't tell many people why Mason and I broke up, but Brooke told her boyfriend, who told someone else, and the story spread. For mutual friends stopped responding to my texts, unfollowed me on social media. I assumed they were siding with Mason, didn't believe me or thought I was overreacting. Others said they always thought his treatment was off. A book club member wrote a long message saying she was glad I got away from Mason because he often spoke over me in groups. A gym friend said Mason made comments about other women's bodies when I wasn't around, which always made him uncomfortable. 3 weeks later, I met 4 college friends for coffee downtown. I trusted them to be honest. We ordered drinks, sat at a corner table. I asked if Mason had ever said anything weird about my appearance. My first friend said Mason made jokes about my hair, asking if I should try a new style, or if I was really going to eat dessert, or that certain colors weren't flattering. We all laughed uncomfortably at the time, she admitted, because we didn't know what else to do. Another friend said Mason once commented that I was lucky to have him because most guys his age wanted someone younger and thinner. She almost said something, but was afraid of causing a scene. The third friend admitted she'd considered pulling me aside several times, but didn't know how to bring it up without sounding interfering. I sat there, realizing the red flags were obvious to others, even though I had tried to hide them from myself. They apologized for not saying anything sooner. For days after that coffee meeting, Mason wrote me a long email. Subject line, "We need to talk about everything." He listed all the right things he did in our relationship, how I was throwing it all away over one mistake. He listed every nice thing he'd done over 5 years. Driving 7 hours to pick me up when my car broke down, the surprise birthday party 3 years ago, every gift, every vacation, every time he supported me through something difficult. He said he made one comment about wanting me to look my best for our wedding, and I was using it to destroy everything we'd built. I was unfair, unreasonable, and selfish. If I loved him, he pleaded, I would forgive this one mistake and return to him. I read the email 3 times. I wrote a response explaining why his request was a symptom of how he saw me. Deleted it. Wrote a different response about our relationship's cycle of control. Deleted that. I wrote a third version, 2 sentences. I am not coming back. You need to respect my decision. I was about to send it when I called Claire. I read her the email. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said his email was manipulation, designed to make me doubt my decision. Silence, she said, was the clearest boundary I could set. I thanked her. I deleted all 3 drafts without sending them. 9 days later, a letter arrived at my new apartment. The handwriting on the envelope was unfamiliar, but inside were 3 pages of stationery with flowers. Marlene, Mason's mother. She wrote that I was breaking her son's heart and ruining his life. Mason was a good man who deserved a wife who appreciated him. Women, she declared, should be grateful for male attention and willing to maintain themselves to keep it. Her generation, she said, understood that marriage required compromise and sacrifice, but my generation was too selfish to make relationships work. I would regret this decision when I was older and alone, she warned, when I realized I had wasted my chance at a family. Mason, she claimed, told her I refused to discuss his concerns about the wedding photos, proving I didn't love him. I read 2 pages before stopping. It revealed more about her values than anything about me. I didn't care what she thought of me, my choices, or my generation. I threw the letter away without finishing it. The following month, a work friend got married. I almost didn't go. I was afraid it would hurt, watching someone else get married when my own wedding was supposed to be in 10 weeks. But I'd RSVP'd yes, bought a gift. So I put on a dress and drove to the garden ceremony. The bride looked radiant, so happy, and her groom looked at her like she was the only person in the world. He cried when she walked down the aisle. During the vows, he said he loved every part of her and couldn't wait to spend his life making her as happy as she made him. I was so glad I wasn't marrying Mason, so confident I had made the right choice. At the reception, I danced, ate cake, and celebrated a love that looked like love should. I felt fine driving home that night. Grant invited me to lunch the next week. We talked outside at a sandwich shop near the office. It was cold, but we didn't care. He talked about his ex who constantly criticized him, telling him to dress better, work out more, be more social. After that relationship, it took him 3 years to rebuild his confidence, and he still sometimes heard her voice saying he wasn't good enough. Sharing our experiences made me feel less alone. The hardest part, Grant said, was realizing how much he had changed to please her. I assured him I understood that feeling. We finished our sandwiches and returned to work. I was glad to know someone else understood. 7 months after the breakup, Mason showed up at my apartment building as I returned from a run. He said he'd been in therapy, that he understood what he did wrong. His therapist, he claimed, helped him see how his weight comments were harmful and controlling. He asked if we could try again, promising he'd changed, that he would never make me feel that way again. A part of me craved the familiarity, the apology. A part of me wanted to believe people could change. I missed our good times. I was tired of being alone. But I looked at him standing there, and I remembered everything. How he laughed when I asked if he would lose weight. His mother's letter about maintaining myself. 5 years of shrinking to fit what he wanted. I told Mason I appreciated that he was working on himself, but I wasn't interested in getting back together. He looked at me like I spoke a different language. He said I was unfair by not giving him a chance to prove he was different. His voice got louder. He said he went to therapy for me, and I owed him a chance. His anger proved he hadn't changed at all. Mason tried to hug me goodbye, but I stepped back. The hurt on his face almost made me feel guilty, but then I remembered. I wasn't responsible for his emotions anymore. He left without another word. I closed the door and sat on my floor, shaking my hands and body, but my mind was clear. I texted Claire. I held my boundary. It felt terrible and right at the same time. She replied with a proud face emoji, and that's growth. 7 months after the breakup, the lawyer completed the final paperwork to divide our shared assets. He spread the documents across his desk, showing me where to sign. Everything was itemized, fair. The savings account split in half. The furniture we bought together divided by who kept what. The security deposit from our old apartment calculated and allocated. I signed my name on every page, feeling like I was closing a door. I left that office financially independent from Mason, with less money than if we'd stayed together. Our combined incomes had made life easier, but I had more peace than I'd had in years. The trade was worth it. I drove home and transferred half of the savings into my personal account. Seeing that number in my balance made me feel like I was truly building my own life. 1 month later, my manager called me into her office and told me the directors liked my conference work. They offered me a new job immediately. The raise was big enough to buy a better apartment or start saving for things I really wanted. That night, Brooke and Harper and I celebrated at our favorite restaurant with appetizers, dessert, and wine. Brooke kept saying she knew I would get it. Harper raised her glass and said she was proud of me. Grant stopped by my desk the next morning to congratulate me. He said he told management about my conference work and several directors had asked him about me. I thanked him for believing in me and realized I was building a professional reputation completely unrelated to any relationship. My career and my success were mine, and nobody could take them away. I booked a solo vacation with some of the wedding money. Mason always wanted to go places together, but his idea of vacation involved tours, schedules, and restaurant reservations made weeks in advance. I booked a cabin near Rocky Mountain National Park with no plan, except to do what felt right each day. The first morning, I made coffee and sat on the porch, watching the sun rise over the mountains. Nobody asked me what I wanted to do or suggested activities. I hiked a trail I found on a map at the visitor center for 5 hours, stopping to take photos or just to breathe. Every decision was mine. Where I ate breakfast, how I spent my afternoons when I went to bed, hiking different trails each day, reading 4 books, and eating at restaurants without worrying about others' preferences felt like finally breathing fully after years of holding my breath. I returned from vacation feeling lighter, more myself. And I realized I hadn't checked Mason's social media in over 9 days. I sat by a fire outside my cabin on the last night and felt settled, like I hadn't in 5 years. I opened the app out of curiosity and saw he hadn't looked at my profile in weeks. His mental space had shrunk to almost nothing as I filled it with my own hobbies, friendships, and career goals. I joined a downtown coffee shop book club and took a pottery class on Tuesday nights. I planned outings with coworkers and built a life that reflected who I was, instead of who others wanted me to be. Claire and I discussed ending therapy at our next session. She said I was doing so much better and I could see it too. I left Mason 7 months ago, I told her, and wondered if I made the right choice. Now I know I did. Claire said I learned to set boundaries and trust my instincts, which would help me in every relationship. I wanted to see her less often, so we agreed on monthly sessions instead of weekly. I left her office, feeling ready. In early spring, I started casually dating again, just coffee dates and park walks, and I noticed changes in my behavior immediately. I stated my preferences clearly. I ended dates early without apologizing or explaining when something felt off. I went on a date with a man who spent the whole time talking about his ex-girlfriend. I finished my coffee and told him I didn't think we were a good match. He seemed surprised, but I trusted my instincts. Harper called me one Saturday morning and asked if we could meet for breakfast. We had good omelets at a place near her apartment. She told me she was proud of how I handled everything with Mason, and that watching me leave a bad situation gave her the courage to set better boundaries in her own life. Her boss had been taking advantage of her for months, asking her to work late without extra pay, answering emails on weekends, making her feel guilty when she said no. Harper told him she would no longer be available outside her scheduled hours. Her boss was upset, but he accepted it. She said seeing me choose myself helped her realize she could do the same. That said something. 10 months after the breakup, I ran a half marathon, 14 weeks of training. For weekday runs, 2 longer runs on Sundays. I pushed myself each week, getting stronger, clearer. Race day was cold and sunny. Hundreds of runners lined up. The gun went off and we started moving. The first few miles felt easy. My legs were fresh, my breathing steady. Around mile 8, my legs started to hurt, but I kept going. Mile 11 was hard. My body wanted to stop, but I told myself I could do 2 more miles. I finished 13.5 miles, and someone put a medal around my neck. My legs were shaking. My lungs were burning. I felt amazing. Crossing that finish line showed how far I had come. I carried myself 13.5 miles on strength I built for myself, not to impress others or look good in photos. I was proud of what I had accomplished. 3 weeks after the half marathon, Grant invited me to a barbecue at his apartment building. Just some friends getting together, he said. I should come meet them. I brought a bottle of wine and was nervous walking up to his apartment building. Grant opened the door and introduced me to 7 people sitting around his living room. They were warm immediately, asking about my running, my job, my hobbies. Nobody commented on how I looked or what I ate when we went to the patio for burgers. One woman mentioned training for a triathlon and asked if I wanted to join her running group. While eating potato salad and drinking beer, a guy told stories about his terrible dating experiences that made everyone laugh. I realized this was what normal felt like. People who didn't think bodies were topics for public discussion and who cared about what you did and thought instead of how you looked. I went home that night feeling lighter. 1 month later, Lauren texted me to see how I was doing. I stared at her name on my phone for a minute before responding. We agreed to meet for coffee on Saturday morning. I arrived early, ordered a latte. Lauren arrived looking healthy and happy. We hugged and sat down. She asked about my life since the breakup. I told her about therapy, the promotion, the half marathon. She nodded, said she was proud of me for leaving. She told me about her own 7 months of therapy after Mason. She joined a book club, started painting again. She learned to recognize red flags early. Then she met someone new, someone who never suggested she change anything about herself, who loved her exactly as she was. She showed me photos of her engagement ring. Her face lit up when she talked about her partner. In early summer, I moved into a larger 1-bedroom apartment. My promotion salary allowed me to afford more space, a better neighborhood. I spent 14 days decorating it exactly the way I wanted. I bought a bright blue couch just because I loved the color. I chose furniture to create a reading nook by the window, hung art that made me smile, without worrying if guests would like it. The apartment was mine alone, so I didn't have to worry about Mason or his mother's opinions. When I came home from work 11 months after the breakup, I was proud of my yellow curtains and my blue couch. Mason sent a text saying he was dating someone new. My stomach dropped. I read it twice. I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just a mild sense of closure. I typed a polite response, wishing him well, preferring to keep our interactions professional. I deleted his number from my phone. We were done. I was building something new. Brooke's birthday party was on a warm June Saturday. She rented a rooftop downtown, invited 45 people. I wore a dress I bought because I loved it. Grant was talking to Harper. Some of my running group stood by the bar. I grabbed a drink, joined conversations, laughed at jokes, made plans for dinner next week. Halfway through the party, I realized something. I was happy with my life. Not just okay or healing, but truly, deeply happy with what I was building. Brooke asked what was funny, why I was smiling so much. I told her I'm just happy. She hugged me and said she could tell. Claire asked me what I learned from this experience at our last regular session in July. I thought about it for a minute. Love should not require me to change my body or my voice, I told her. The right person will celebrate who I am, instead of criticizing who I am not. I learned that I am worth that kind of love, to trust my instincts when something feels wrong, and that leaving a bad situation takes courage, but staying in one takes even more. Claire smiled and said I had done important work. She said I could call her if I needed support, but she thought I could handle whatever came next. I left her office, feeling ready. I scrolled through my phone's photos of Mason and me at restaurants, parks, parties from August. I expected to feel sad, but I felt grateful. Grateful I discovered his conditional love before we got married. Grateful I had the courage to leave when I saw who he was. Grateful for the 14 months of growth that taught me to value myself. Those 5 years weren't wasted. They taught me what I didn't want, and the difference between someone who loves you and someone who loves controlling you. I closed the photo app and deleted the album. At a September dinner party, my running group friend invited me to her house for food and games. When I arrived, I saw a stranger helping in the kitchen. My friend introduced us. He asked about my running, seeming genuinely interested in my half-marathon training. He talked about his job, his family, his plans to hike the Appalachian Trail. For 2 hours, he never mentioned my appearance. It felt easy and equal, which I had forgotten was possible. After the party, he asked for my number. I gave it to him, curious. For days later, he texted me to dinner. I stared at the message, excited and nervous, but not afraid. I knew red flags now, and I trusted myself to walk away. That self-trust was the best thing I got from leaving Mason. I said yes and suggested a restaurant. We made plans for Friday night. I put my phone down and smiled. This felt different. This felt right. 14 months after taking off my engagement ring, I was training for a full marathon. I ran 4 times a week, did strength training 3 times a week. My body was strong and my mind was clear. I booked a trip to Iceland in October to see the northern lights and hike through lava fields. Work was going well. I got another small promotion and more responsibility. I was building a life where I took up space without apologizing, where my worth wasn't tied to how I looked in others' photos. I remembered the night Mason asked me to lose weight, how small he tried to make me feel, and I considered taking off that ring, choosing myself. I was prouder than ever of who I was becoming. So, tell me, have you ever been asked to change who you are for someone else? Or faced a moment that completely redefined what love meant to you? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below.